Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About HR, a weekly podcast where we explore the forces shaping our roles today, from new technologies, shifting expectations to tightening budgets. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Now, before we get going with the show, I'd like to thank our sponsors Pinpoint for making this episode possible. Pinpoint, in my opinion, is a fantastic applicant tracking system. We use them across a number of our clients at Instant Impact. Absolutely love their functionality. They've got some really cool features around anonymizing applications in particular, fantastic reporting suite, and a really smart and exciting product roadmap as well. I think they've really got their heads screwed on tight. Whether you're a small company or a large company looking for a really modern ATS, I definitely recommend you give them a call. Just go to pinpointhq.com and specify that you heard about them through We Need to Talk About HR. You'll get a Friends of the Podcast discount. How cool is that? Now, on with the show. What a treat it is to have Hung Lee on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Felix, absolutely my pleasure being here, man.
And if you don't know Hung, his newsletter, Recruiting Brainfood, supplies the talent acquisition industry, recruitment industry, with a steady drip of industry news, best practice, and I think the odd bit of gossip as well. To give a feel for scale here, we're talking over 45,000 subscribers, and that's on LinkedIn alone. You have to give us an update on the full readership.
Yeah, it's ticking up, mate. I mean, there's multiple channels now, and it does seem to grow. I mean, LinkedIn in particular, whether they're pushing the newsletter or not, I don't know, but I think we're at 48,000 now. So it ticks up really quite fast. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to speak to the audience in this way, and it's a big responsibility, but I'm very happy to try and stimulate conversation in the right direction.
Fantastic. And just to give listeners a bit of a feel for the kind of guy that you are, I think something that will always stick in my brain is I reached out to you, never met me before. I sent an email back to one of your newsletters saying, hey, I'm thinking of setting up a newsletter, which is where I started, called Talent Bites. Would you jump on a call and give me some advice? Couldn't have been more than 30 seconds. And you're saying, yeah, absolutely, keen to do it. And I've absolutely taken your advice to heart on my thought leadership journey. So thanks for that. I really, really appreciate it. And it's an honor to have you on.
No, my pleasure, Felix. And yeah, I'm a believer that the more is better. I know a lot of people think, do we need another newsletter? Do we need another podcast? I think absolutely we do. Yeah, everyone should do one. I'm not at all territorial in this way. I actually think that the more voices, the better. I believe in a polyphonic ecosystem. All right, so more voices. We need to claim our voice in the public discourse, and if I can help people do that, then I'm gonna basically.
Well, someone needs to claw it back from the LinkedIn algorithm.
That's right. We're all getting hammered at this point, aren't we?
AI speaking to AI at the moment is absolutely nuts. So obviously, I think you get a really interesting perspective of trends in the recruitment industry, but I guess more in the sort of workforce as well. And we're here to pick apart one in particular, which I know you have a sort of an individual take on, which is this multigenerational workforce. Real hot topic. Lots of people talking about 4 or 5 generations working together and all the friction that's caused. But what's your take on the whole thing?
Yeah, really exciting moment. I'm actually very positive about this. I know a lot of people think, Hung, you're a bit of a doomer of late. But the one thing I'm positive on is that we are encountering a period where we have lots of people from different generational cohorts actually working in the same company. And that's unusual because usually we've kind of I think there's up to 4 to 5 generational cohorts actually working in the same company. Now, we can also say things like, look, we don't want to go into generational stereotyping per se. Everyone's different. Everyone's got individual personalities. All that I accept is true. But I do think your formative experience of work, you do carry it with you over time. So, for instance, if you entered the world of work pre-internet, I think we could describe that type of person slightly differently from someone who knows only work in the internet and doesn't know the world before that. Same with mobile. Now we're talking about AI as well. These big technological changes, I think, do create a little bit of a break in terms of the experience people have. And hence, it's going to be very interesting challenges for companies to try and integrate these communities together, because they do think differently, they behave differently, have a different relationship with work, different relationship with technology, often culturally very different in terms of value set. So yeah, a big challenge for companies, also a huge opportunity, because where difference kind of comes together, that's when sometimes magic happens.
So I definitely agree with you with the last point. I have to state my claim here. And by the way, listeners, we're going to be broad brushstroke. We're going to be unapologetic about it. We're going to stereotype, we're going to have to, because we're talking about generations. So with that out of the way, I am a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the issues caused by the multi-generational workforce. I do believe that there are new motivators in the workforce, but I really think that I'm not sure that the real variable is what generation people are in, more around, what you were saying before, what technology they're exposed to at what stages of their life. And, we were running a search for senior, partners at a law firm, and we were doing some insights into their key motivators. It's exactly the same as people coming in Gen Z. The biggest motivator, work-life balance. Biggest reason they were changing firms, flexible working, hybrid working. And that's exactly, people coming in saying, how are we going to deal with these Gen Z coming in? All they want to do is work from home. All they want to do is look after their pets and darn in the afternoons. So I'm again being, but I wonder whether it's just felt more keenly with people coming into the workforce, because we look back at when we started and it was a different status quo.
Yeah, it's different. I mean, I entered the world of work, again, just using myself as this is me search now, right? So you can take it, leave it as you see fit. But I entered the world of work when we were kind of now in the web, now in the internet, but I was working alongside colleagues and bosses that were pre-internet. And in the world of recruiting, you could see a slow transition between what were the most important ways to communicate with people. Prior to 2000s, it was generally a phone-based job in recruitment. If you're a good phone worker, you're a good recruiter. But as I observed sort of my colleagues and, on my own career progression onto the 2000 and noughties all the way through, it became very clear that the better you were at internet and email, you actually were out achieving the guys on the phone. And now you accelerate 20 years down the line, and actually phone work, of course, is important, but it's probably less important than it is being able to do written communication or be efficient using things like search and now going forward to artificial intelligence, being able to prompt AI. Those are going to be more significantly important skills than being a good person on a cold call. So there's a shift in the sort of skills that companies would value based on the means of communication that we kind of use.
And do you think then the generational aspect creeps in that, the earlier you are in your brain development, the easier it is to pick up a new skill?
Firstly, there's that definitely. So skills acquisition does change over time. The sort of neuroplasticity is something that we're now very sort of aware of. Whereas essentially, the younger you are, the more the plasticity there is in your brain. And the older you get, the more habitual you become, the more efficient you want to get to. You stop exercising those parts of your brain, and they eventually atrophy because you're not using them anymore. So ossification of the brain does occur.
That's a bad thought.
It is
true though.
However, you can resist it simply by exposing yourself to new technologies, new information, new thoughts, and exercising your brain that way. So I'm not saying your brain is a muscle, but it is like an electrical system that fires sort of electrical signals through these neurons, neural pathways, so to say. And those pathways are literally maps in your brain. If you just keep doing the same pathways, you'll end up sort of totally habitualizing into those areas. Whereas what you've got to do is try and find and discover new things. So you've always got to be on the edge and push yourself out of your comfort zone mentally in order to keep the plasticity there. So we know skills acquisition is related to that. But I also think that the primary device you use to communicate affects how you then use other ways to communicate. So, for instance, we know that if you encounter the internet first with mobile, then you end up having more truncated sentences in how you write because you're used to texting. And you're not writing long paragraphs and what have you. And we can actually see the numbers of words actually going down on email over time because actually more and more people, that we're chatting on mobile devices.
Same way that we would on WhatsApp.
Correct.
So interesting.
So we're becoming more chat focused on email and less letter writing. So yes, I think technology has a huge impact, particularly the first thing you pick up as a young person.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows what's next? You've got all of the augmented reality things coming out from Apple. So it's going to be some kind of weird and wonderful world of technology mixing with the physical.
Yeah, but tools change behavior, right? And they're going to change our brains. So, it's going to be very interesting to observe how. I think AR is probably going to be more niche than you say AI, but AI will change how we think. Probably, I would say probably not for the better, but because it will take off a lot of the neural work, and we might end up kind of dumbing ourselves down because artificial intelligence will do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, similar to the physical exercise. We're probably now not as fit as we were because we've got vehicles. New technology kind of might degrade the body, and I think new technology might degrade the mind as well. So lots to think about here.
Hang on a minute. At the beginning of this podcast, you said you were going to bring in some real positivity around multi-generational.
Hey, Felix, this is all positive because it means that we can do something about it.
Right.
These are just general trends trending away, but I am a big believer in human agency in the sense that we as individuals have a lot of control as to what happens in our lives. And I think we need to firstly be aware of these general trends that kind of push us to a certain direction. If we don't like that, we can potentially step out of that trend, or we can swim against it, or we can swim with it even further. So I'm positive in the sense that we have the agency. I just think we need to recognize where these things are driving us.
I agree with you. I'm also I'm a glass half full, or glass completely full kind of guy. So I think we're looking at the forces shaping the workplace and how we approach work at the minute. When we're looking at the generations coming in, you mentioned a tension, potentially a positive tension between the generations. How should company leadership, how should people leaders, recruitment leaders think about harnessing the best out of the generational differences?
I'm going to throw in an idea here, which I really think is something we need to really embed into the world of recruiting. We need to think about responsive job design, right? Responsive job design is an idea that basically the job should be dynamic and evolve with the person's life circumstances. And this reflects this multi-generational approach. The problem we currently have is that we've designed a job as if everyone's a 25-year-old person, right? Every job that we have, when we design it on a job spec, is designed with that template in mind, which is why it's always been kind of non-inclusive, because people who are not that template will have to do extra work in order to perform in that job or even secure that job. So a good example of this would be interviewing, for instance, face-to-face interviewing. We know, for instance, that bringing someone in to do a face-to-face interview prioritizes certain types of person based on lifestyle. And now, the obvious one would be, people who've got physically able versus people who've got physical disabilities. But there's other things associated with this. For instance, we know that women remain the primary caregiver for young people and old people. So actually asking people to come in to do a face-to-face interview requires more effort for the woman than it does for an equivalent man. And we haven't thought about this, because we've designed the job as if everyone is a 25-year-old man. So anyway, responsive job design is this idea that, we should really understand that different people are going to have different life circumstances, and we should recognize that those life circumstances will also change over time, and can the job evolve with it? So can it respond to the person's work? A good example would be parenthood. You get a job they haven't designed it on the basis of the fact you're a parent. They've designed it if you're a 25-year-old person without responsibilities. Suddenly you're a parent. You need to spend time at home. You want to spend
time. Exactly.
Right? Why does the job not evolve to help you do that? Why is it that you need to kind of request special dispensation, feel as if you've got to ask for stuff, and it's within the company's gift to then give you that flexibility. And of course, if it doesn't happen, you end up looking for better work or whatnot, and you have to leave the company. So people's life circumstances change. Can we create jobs that actually evolve with those changes and be responsive? Another example would be age. I'm getting on in my time, and I probably don't want to work as I did when I was 25 years old. Does the job recognize that? No, it don't. It still wants me to break my behind for 50 hours a week, maybe even in office. Can't do that. I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to do 20 hours a week in 2 days. I can still perform doing those things. But again, I need to ask for dispensation. Whereas, in fact, is there a way in which jobs can recognize, or can you pre-build jobs with the recognition that human beings do that job, and therefore human beings change, therefore the jobs should also evolve with that change?
I mean, the logical immediate answer should be, surely they can, right? It's got to be and I think it's one of the things that I get really excited about when it comes to AI. I think the only thing that requires is a lot of thought and it's essentially number crunching, right? It's capacity calculation, understanding what activities are done by what people, which to a lean HR function in a small company, it's just not going to happen, right? They've got too many other things on their plate. But if that becomes a priority, you can easily see an AI model understanding, analyzing the sales pipeline and the account management pipeline, understanding what activities need to be done, and then pushing that out to a more liquid workforce, and then people can self-serve what they want to do.
This is what I think AI will really be very useful on, because a lot of these problems, the reason why jobs are static is because it's a data problem. Like we can't pre-technology, we're not able to actually figure out what's required and how to best shape this job. But I think if we're able to kind of create a space where the worker is able to communicate situations back to the business, then I see no reason why we're not able to create these jobs that kind of are a little bit more plastic as we go forward. Plastic is probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Moldable, evolvable, liquid is a decent term. And I see that as a decent pathway. I had a chat, for instance, with a friend of mine who's getting on in his career. And he probably would want to do 20 hours a week now. But his only option is to continue doing 50 hours a week, or enter a job market at the age of 59.
Yeah.
Which is not good. He's not going to have huge chances out there. And every job he would secure would also ask him to do full-time and whatnot. So I'm thinking, why are we crushing this person? Is there a way in which the job can actually evolve to where he physically, mentally, energy, motivation-wise is more suitable and compatible for him?
It's quite interesting, right? Because there are definitely seniorities and roles where that fractional piece are really well established. So, at your C, you can get a C-level anyone apart from I don't think you can do a fractional CEO. I've never seen one of those. That'd be quite an odd concept. But, you can get a fractional CTO, CFO, CHRO, those sort of organizations exist. If you look at the digital marketing world, all of that, you can pick an hour up of someone's time to do search engine optimization or whatever that is. And I think that definitely feels like an interesting trend. But to point around that 25-year-old male, I feel like those sorts of, there are definitely careers where that flexibility exists, but it's very skewed towards the high-paying jobs, the very skilled workers.
Yeah, they're not even careers. They're sort of things that people have negotiated on their own. So what's interesting about fractional working, as you say, it's these C-level people have done this, and all credit to them. But they've really kind of used their own professional network, their own power that they've accrued over achieving a seniority to be able to negotiate the space for that to happen. So it's not coming from the system at all. It's like negotiated by these elite performers that are able to carve out sort of this space. I'd just like to see, maybe a company can do something where you recognize that people's lives might change one way or the other. Is it possible to invent that? I think absolutely.
Well, and it's interesting because I think I see it from the supply side. So I see it. There are definitely some companies that specialize in back to work parents, working free. I actually think it's called my 3-day work week or something like that. I'll put it in there. I'll find it and put it in the comments of the episode. But I definitely see that. But it would be interesting to see it on the demand side, on the job side. I completely agree with you. I think that's a really fascinating challenge, and I also agree that there's technology at the core of it. So let's go to the sort of people entering the workforce at the moment. Are you noticing anything different about Gen Z, those taking their first jobs out of school, out of university?
So it's fair to say that I'm kind of quite distant to that cohort at a personal level. I'm the kind of move way beyond it. However, I do think there's a lot of stereotyping which is generally unfair. I think the motivation is very high for Gen Z. People, I think, they're entering into a different world than it has been the case last 10, 15 years or so. We know that it's a high cost of living environment. The era of consistent growth and predictable growth is no longer there. And jobs are hard to come by. So I think Gen Z, people coming into the workforce, are highly motivated. They want to get in. I think they also want to work on premise. They want to kind of just get on with their lives. And I think there's a lot of quality to be recruited if companies have the foresight and the capacity to bring them on. So yeah, I'm enthusiastic about the youth, generally speaking. And yeah, you get the odd report to say, yeah, they're not prepared, not this, that, and the other. But they said the same when I was getting into the world of work, in 2000s. There's always a dissatisfaction from employer side that the academic world hasn't adequately prepared people for the world of work. I think that's a fair comment. But you can also argue maybe that's not the purpose of academia, to perfectly create an accountant for you. Maybe you can argue either way whether you want to do that, but in the UK system, at least, the academic kind of journey is there to try and develop this individual with more generic skill set and maturity, intellectual curiosity, all of those things, which I think is something I would strongly favour rather than just a completely utilitarian way of managing skills.
Well, me too. I mean, not least what you were saying before, the success in the future is going to be much more dependent on your neuroplasticity, your desire, your love of learning over knowing a particular skill, because skills are they'll be automated.
Well, no question. I mean, the what is the degree of if you look at sort of how AI is replacing skills or duplicating human skills, you do wonder, what is the point in human beings necessarily having that domain expertise? What the humans really need to have is the ability to very quickly acquire those skills, and then to manipulate AI to produce the outputs. So yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the rote learning, I don't think helps anybody. You may argue the case it helps on a mental training side. The rigor of doing it may be useful, but the raw content itself, probably not so much.
I have a question which is completely off topic that just popped into my head that I really want to ask you about the recruitment industry more generally. This world I think you and I are both big believers that AI is going to really revolutionize the industry. How quickly and how well do you think that the industry at large has reacted or is reacting to AI?
The industry, I think, is such a big rubric. So oftentimes when we talk about the recruitment industry, that there are in fact like hundreds of different industries based on what type of recruitment you do, what region you do it in, what sector, and all that type of stuff. A lot of the disputes occur because we're actually centering on different types of a more complicated ecosystem. Having said that, I do think we've seen some really impressive early adopters do some really interesting things with artificial intelligence, predominantly becoming super efficient with a lot less people in doing a lot of the traditional recruitment activities. Whether that's sourcing, whether that's lead generation, whether that's like outbound calling even, or even appointment booking, all of the components of a recruiter's job, which consume time. If you did an audit of the activities a recruiter did over the course of a week, and then you looked at some other external examples of how different companies are reducing that time to time allocated to those tasks, then you'll think, goodness, there's a lot of productivity gains to be had here.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I think I've definitely seen a better uptake in smaller businesses than
100%.
Larger, maybe unsurprisingly, actually.
Not surprising. The larger companies are always constrained. There's always more bureaucratic oversight, which prevents this type of experimentation. And where that experimentation does happen, it's typically kind of unlicensed and unguided. So it always stays in that gray area. It doesn't get systematized across the organization because basically this person is doing it without permission. Whereas if you're a smaller business, a solo player, you obviously experiment very freely. And also if you're more agency side or supply side rather than internal, you typically have a little bit more freedom also. So I would even say that recruitment agencies have been amongst the more impressive appliers and adopters of artificial intelligence than in-house and corporate. And I think primarily because of those constraints that exist in corporate.
Well, and also I feel like if we're going to keep our broad brushstroke out, quite a happy with risk set of folks.
Absolutely. More risk averse, sort of more. They have a different risk profile to the internal guys for sure.
Which I think is good and sort of I think keeps the industry on its toes. How do you feel? One of the things that's really on my mind. We're full on talking about the recruitment industry now. I think this is good. We've meandered away from the topic, but I'm comfortable with that. I think one of the things that's on my mind is with AI in particular having such a huge impact on productivity, on ways of working, not just in our sector, but also in every sector that we support. I find it quite hard to personally give a good answer to how's the world of recruitment going to shape around those forces. I wonder if you've picked up any interesting insights.
Yeah, I think there's the AI doomer approach, which is artificial intelligence is going to disrupt huge amounts of work. There's going to be loads of people actually got no economic value anymore because AI is doing all of this. Then you've got the kind of a techno-optimist view, which is, yes, there'll be disruption, but actually new opportunities will emerge as a result of this disruption, and they point back to the Industrial Revolution and stuff like this, where, new innovation comes in. Canonical example actually is the advent of the ATM. So the ATM was once presumed to be, a killer of the cashier. The bank teller, because suddenly you can get money without interacting with a human being. But it turned out there was a boost of employment in banks and frontline after the introduction of ATMs, and it was like it went opposite to how we think. However, we can also see that branches are now closing. So it could well be what happens is that when technology is adopted, we have an unpredictable outcome in terms of the amount of work. It may well go one way or the other, we don't know, but ultimately it will reduce the amount of work in that area, because the purpose of technology is actually become more efficient. And if you get more efficient, you basically need less human hours doing that. Now, the two questions we have as a society is, firstly, what are we going to do with the excess time that we now secure? So great, I want technology to come in and really take away my admin. That's amazing. I think all of us would be joyous if that was the case. But what happens to that time? Like, do we get the opportunity to do the things that we say we want to do, or does someone else kind of capture that time and then have us do work that we don't want to do? So that we need to think about this. Like, what do we do with the excess time that we have?
Well, that's if we do. So I definitely see that there's going to be a the short-term effect of that. I think the other factor that I think is really interesting is the rapid, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, but the rapidly diminishing active workforces that we're seeing in, I mean, all of Western Europe, in America. So actually, America's workforce is increasing, but only because of immigration. No economy has ever recovered from a diminishing workforce. So I think it's fair to say that it's quite likely that our workforce will continue diminishing. The number of dependents that we have on that workforce are going to continue increasing. I mean, maybe we're just buying ourselves a bit of respite before that happens.
So there's another optimist view, which is not the same as the one I described earlier, which is exactly bringing the demographic perspective, which is to say, look, AI will disrupt jobs, but actually we have less and less workers going forward. So isn't that a good thing? And I think that's a really interesting sort of argument. On the surface, this seems to make sense. So demographic crisis, we have increasing dependency ratio, meaning essentially for people who are listening here, basically means smaller workforce over time, supporting more and more people because we're living longer. So, okay, what do we do there? Okay, what if we just had loads of robots then? Or what if we had loads of automation? Doesn't that then basically supply more labor supporting that workforce? Answer is kind of yes, but also kind of no, because how we support society is not necessarily through direct application of work. It's also through taxation, right? So are we going to the Bill Gates idea that we need to tax robots? How does even that work, right?
So, I hadn't heard that idea. That's really interesting.
Or it was not necessarily taxing robots, but taxing companies that would actually deploy robots. And that was sort of one of the very early thoughts to say we need to do something about how the monetary system works and the fiscal system works. Because if we do move down this road where actually automation and AI replace human labor, that seems like a good thing. Humans will have lots of free time. We all need and want this. We want to spend more time with our kids. We want to look after our parents. We want to take care of the environment. We want to do all of these things. These are normal things that we should be doing, claiming our time back. But of course, we're in a market economy. So how does that extra time feed into what is a market economy, or do we need to rethink the market economy? So this is where we're moving into, really quite, I won't say deep because it's pretty shallow, but it is like politically charged rhetoric in terms of how we think about economics and society.
And again, to pull it back to slightly the positive, it's quite nice to see. I mean, scary, but nice to see a big problem that institutions and politicians are going to need to step up and solve. I wish we had a better set of leaders in, but these are really fascinating times for solving humanity's problems.
Yeah, I think so. I'm fundamentally pro technology because, look, you can't turn the clock back anyway. You can't unscramble this.
It doesn't make a difference if you're pro or anti.
Yeah, right? This is a trend that you can't really stop. So we might as well accelerate to it. But what we've got to do really is think about the outcomes of the adoption, and how can we make sure that we are not leaving huge swaths of humanity behind. How can we make sure that the benefits of technology innovation are as widely distributed as possible throughout society? I fundamentally believe technology should serve humanity. But it's curious to just observe that technology has traditionally not done that. It served a very small percentage of humanity. And we need to really have a much broader spread. Go back to Industrial Revolution, everyone loves. Industrial Revolution created huge wealth acquisition from the industrialists that commanded it. And these are people that we all laud to this day. They've got institutions, Carnegie Institute here, all of these people. But they captured a huge amount of the technology, the value produced by technology innovation. And there was millions of people actually slaving away, working down the coal mines and doing all that type of stuff and having really tough and horrible lives in order to service that. Now, I would hope that we have a slightly better go at it with this generation of technology.
Let's hope so. I mean, even more recently than Industrial Revolution, I've been reading When McKinsey Comes to Town, which if you haven't read it is fantastic read. But I think in a lot of ways, that's quite akin to what's going on right now, which is McKinsey oversaw a massive trend in outsourcing jobs to India at the same time as, so obviously the income disparity, income at the sort of lowest level of economic activity, the sort of administration that was going on, the back office work, absolutely being decimated and, really low, at the same time that CEO salaries were going through the roof. So I fear that when we start zeroing out the activity that's done at that administration level, I do think, unfortunately, that probably if trends stay the same, which I really genuinely hope they don't, probably going to see more income disparity.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's basically what happens with technology innovation. And I just don't think it needs to be that way. One of the things that we have to do is just to be a bit more conscious about it. Hence, people accuse me of being a doomer, but I'm not a doomer really. All I'm saying is, look, you've got to be aware. Let's remove the naive optimism. Let's be aware these are the trends. And you know what? We as the people can do something about this. Positively, pro-technology, but we can kind of say, okay, if we do adopt this, we want a better share of the value.
Yeah, and if you don't call out what the challenges are, you're never going to be able to solve them. First thing is saying out loud and saying, guys, this is an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, which is very upsetting. But I really enjoyed this conversation. It was one of my. I always love it when a conversation goes off in weird and wonderful directions. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Felix. Keep going with it, mate. It's brilliant.